Esther and David lived in the bustling city of Lagos, Nigeria. Their home was a modest, warm place in the heart of Surale, filled with laughter and the aroma of rich Nigerian dishes. From the moment they exchanged vows in a colorful, joyous wedding, their hearts brimmed with dreams of starting a family. They envisioned a life filled with the pitter-patter of tiny feet, the soft cries of a newborn, and the joyful chaos that children bring. But as months turned into years, the children they hoped for did not come. David, Esther would often say, her voice tinged with a sadness she tried hard to mask, "I wonder what is taking so long. Everyone else around us seems to be moving forward with ease." She would look out the window of their small kitchen, watching neighborhood children play, their laughter ringing through the air like a reminder of what she did not have. David, a strong, compassionate man who worked as an engineer, would take her hand gently. "Esther, my love, we are not everyone else. Our time will come, I am sure of it." But doubt was a stubborn guest in their home. Their friends and family, initially supportive, began to ask probing questions at every opportunity. "Esther,
are you not taking care of yourself? Are you doing what you're supposed to do?" her mother would ask, concern lacing her words.
And when these questions began to sting more than they could bear, David and Esther decided it was time to seek help. Their journey took them first to local herbalists, who were revered in their community for their knowledge of traditional medicine. Baba Ode has helped many couples, a neighbor had whispered to Esther one afternoon. He has special roots and herbs that can make a woman fertile. Desperate for a solution, they visited Baba Ode, an old man with a deep, booming voice and hands worn from years of preparing herbal remedies.
"Oh, my children," he said, his eyes filled with wisdom. "You have come to the right place. The gods will bless you with a child, but you must be patient and follow my instructions carefully."
For months, Esther drank bitter concoctions and followed the rituals prescribed by Baba Ode. They prayed fervently, attended countless vigils at church, and continued to hope. But still, nothing changed. One day, after another disappointing visit from her monthly cycle, Esther broke down. "David,
I don't understand. Why is this happening to us? What have
we done wrong?" she cried, her shoulders shaking with sobs. David held her close, his own heart breaking. "We have done nothing wrong, Esther. Sometimes, these things happen for reasons we cannot understand. But we will keep trying. We will see a doctor. Maybe they can help us find out what is wrong." And so, they made their way to a clinic in Ikeja, one of the more reputable medical centers in Lagos. Here, they met Dr. Nelson, a kind but straightforward doctor who specialized in fertility issues. After a series of tests, Dr. Nelson called them into his office. His face was calm but serious. "Esther, David, I have the result of your test. Esther, your hormone levels indicate a hormonal imbalance, which could be affecting your ability to conceive. And David, your sperm count is lower than normal, which also makes it challenging to achieve pregnancy." The words hung in the air, heavy with disappointment and fear. Esther felt a lump form in her throat. "Is there anything we can do?" she whispered. Dr. Nelson nodded. "There are medications that can help with both of your conditions. They are not guaranteed to work, but many couples have found success with them. It will require patience, perseverance, and prayer." The next few months were a blur of medications, doctor visits, and emotional highs and lows. Esther took pills to regulate her hormones, while David began a regimen to improve his sperm count. They continued to pray, clinging to their faith and each other. But the medications brought their own set of challenges. Esther experienced mood swings and weight gain, and David often felt weak and tired. Yet, through it all, they leaned on each other, their love growing stronger even in the face of adversity. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, David found Esther sitting in their living room, her face buried in her hands. He sat beside her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. "We will get through this, Esther," he said softly. "I believe in us. I believe in our love." Esther looked up at him, her eyes red from crying. "David, I'm scared. What if we never have a child? What if all of this is for nothing?" David took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "Even if we never have a child, we have each other. And that is more than enough. But I believe we will be parents one day. We just have to keep trying." And so, they continued on their journey, facing each new day with a mix of hope and trepidation. They sought the advice of specialists, tried different treatments, and prayed for a miracle. One day, while they were visiting Dr. Nelson for another round of tests, the doctor's face broke into a smile. "Esther, David, I have good news," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Esther, your hormone levels are improving, and David, your sperm count is much better. I believe we are on the right track." Hope surged in their hearts, cautious but undeniable. For the first time in a long while, they allowed themselves to imagine the possibility of a future with a child. They began to prepare, slowly and quietly, for the child they hoped would soon come. And then, one day, after years of waiting, praying, and enduring, Esther felt a change. It was subtle at first, just a feeling of something different. She dismissed it as wishful thinking, not wanting to get her hopes up. But as days passed, the feeling grew stronger, and she decided to take a test. David stood outside the bathroom, his heart pounding with anticipation. When Esther emerged, her face was pale, her eyes wide. "David," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's positive. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, David was too stunned to speak. Then, joy broke over him like a wave, and he swept Esther into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "We did it, Esther. We did it." The months that followed were a whirlwind of excitement and preparation. Esther's pregnancy was not without its challenges, but with each passing day, their anticipation grew. They chose the name Gift for their unborn child, believing that this baby was indeed a gift from God after all their struggles. On a rainy night in August, after hours of labor, Esther gave birth to a healthy baby girl. As she held little Gift in her arms for the first time, tears streamed down her face. "She's beautiful, David. She's everything we ever dreamed of." David, standing beside her, felt a surge of love so powerful it took his breath away. "She's our miracle, Esther. Our gift." The compound where David and Esther live was a modest one, with 4 small flats built around a central courtyard. The children's laughter often filled the air, a harmonious blend of innocence and mischief. To outsiders, it seemed like a haven of unity, but within, cracks of envy and discontent lay hidden, marked by polite smiles and casual greetings. Gift, affectionately called Peace by her parents, was a bright and lively girl. Her laughter was like a melody that brought warmth to anyone's heart. Esther and David saw their daughter as a divine blessing, a miracle that came after 17 long years of fervent prayers and nights spent in tears. They nurtured her with love and faith, instilling in her the values of kindness and humility. A woman by name Cecilia lived just a door away, her life overshadowed by a different reality. Her children, Sod and Mike, were the same age as Gift but were known in the compound for their wayward behavior. They were often in trouble at school, and their report cards were a stark reminder of their underperformance. Cecilia's days were filled with frustration and a growing resentment she barely understood. Gift's exceptional behavior and her academic prowess were a constant source of pride for Esther and David. At every parent-teacher meeting, they were commended for their daughter's brilliance and good manners. Cecilia would sit at these meetings, listening to the praises showered upon Gift, feeling an invisible wedge drive deeper between her and the happy family next door. Cecilia's resentment festered quietly at first, a small seed of bitterness that took root with each passing day. She couldn't understand why her own children were struggling while peace seemed to thrive effortlessly. She worked just as hard, prayed just as fervently, and yet, there was a stark difference in their children's lives. Her husband, Isaac, was often indifferent to her complaints. He worked long hours as a bank staff and, when home, preferred the solace of his small radio to the company of his family. Cecilia was left to manage their unruly children and her growing sense of inadequacy alone. She began to see Gift not as a mere child, but as a symbol of her own failures, a constant reminder of what she and her children could never achieve. The turning point came one day when Gift, in her innocent generosity, offered to help Sod with her homework. Sod, embarrassed and angry, lashed out, and the incident became a topic of gossip in the compound. Cecilia's shame turned to anger, and that anger, over time, hardened into something far darker. Chapter. It was a Friday, the end of a long week. Peace had just returned from school, her uniform slightly crumpled but her spirit as lively as ever. She hummed a little tune as she walked into the kitchen, her mother's flask in hand, ready for lunch. The stew was delicious, as always, but a bit bland. Remembering her mother's meticulous cooking habits, she knew she could find salt in the kitchen to add flavor. But as she searched, she realized they were out of salt. Without a second thought, she made her way to Cecilia's door, knocking gently. "Auntie Cecilia, good afternoon," she greeted with her usual politeness. Cecilia opened the door, her face a mask of feigned cheerfulness. "Peace, how are you? How was school today?" "It was fine, Auntie. Please, can I borrow some salt? We don't have any in the house." For a moment, Cecilia froze. She had been in a foul mood all day, her children's antics pushing her patience to its limit. And now, here was Gift, the perfect child, asking for a favor. A wicked thought crossed her mind, one that she quickly tried to dismiss but found herself entertaining nonetheless. "Of course, dear," she said, forcing a smile. She walked to her kitchen, her heart pounding, her hands trembling as she reached for a small, unlabeled container at the back of her cupboard. It was a substance she had bought months ago, something she never thought she'd use. Her mind raced, a battle between her conscience and her envy, but in that moment, envy won. She handed the container to Peace. "Just a little bit," she cautioned, watching the girl's innocent face light up with gratitude. "Thank you, Auntie Cecilia." Peace chirped, completely unaware of the malice behind the seemingly kind gesture. Gift returned to her flat, happily adding the powder to her meal. She sat down at the dining table, humming as she ate, unaware of the little poison slowly seeping in. Envy won. She handed the container to Peace. "Just a little bit," she cautioned, watching the girl's innocent face light up with gratitude. "Thank you, Auntie Cecilia." Peace chirped, completely unaware of the malice behind the seemingly kind gesture. Gift returned to her flat, happily adding the powder to her meal. She sat down at the dining table, humming as she ate, unaware of the little poison slowly seeping into her body. Within an hour, the symptoms began. It started with a stomach ache, then dizziness. By the time she realized something was seriously wrong, it was too late. Alone and terrified, Gift collapsed onto the kitchen floor. As Cecilia and David returned home, while they opened the door, they beheld a disheartening sight. Gift was cold, motionless and lifeless. A child that came after many years of trauma, prayers, concoction ingestion, tablets, injections, several laboratory tests and medical procedures. Grief struck them like a hammer, crushing their spirits, their hearts, their faith. The compound was thrown into chaos, neighbors rushing in to offer help, but no one knew what had happened. The days that followed were a blur of tears, prayers, and unbearable sorrow. Esther and David could not fathom why God would take away their only child, their miracle, their peace. They buried her with heavy hearts, her small grave a painful reminder of the life they had lost. Unable to bear the memories, they decided to leave the compound, hoping that a change of environment would somehow ease their pain. They moved to another area, carrying with them only the memory of their daughter and a heartache that would never fully heal. 7 years passed. Life had taken on a semblance of normalcy for Esther and David, though the shadow of their loss always lingered. They had found solace in their faith, believing that Gift was in a better place, even if they could never understand why she had to leave so soon. Meanwhile, Cecilia's life was far from peaceful. The poison that had taken Gift's life had also taken her own peace of mind. Guilt gnawed at her relentlessly, her nights filled with nightmares of the little girl she had wronged. Her children's lives had not improved, if anything, they had gotten worse. She began to believe that the dark deed she had committed had cost her family. Sod had dropped out of school and had taken to the streets, and Mike had become more rebellious, constantly getting into trouble. Cecilia's husband, Isaac, had grown distant, sensing the turmoil within her but never fully understanding its cause. The guilt became too much for Cecilia to bear. She couldn't sleep without seeing Gift's face, a haunting reminder of her sin. Her health deteriorated, and she grew paranoid, often feeling as if the walls were closing in on her. She had never told anyone what she had done, not even her husband. But the weight of her secret was crushing her, threatening to destroy her completely. One evening, after another heated argument with Isaac about their children's behavior, Cecilia broke down. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched her chest, feeling as though she couldn't breathe. Isaac, taken aback by her sudden collapse, rushed to her side. "What's wrong with you, Cecilia?" he asked, his voice a mix of concern and frustration. "You've been acting strange for years. What is it?" Cecilia looked at him, her eyes filled with fear and regret. She knew she couldn't keep the secret any longer. It was tearing her apart, eating away at her soul. "I need to tell you something, Isaac," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Something terrible, something I've been hiding for so long." Isaac sat down beside her, his face serious. "What is it?" Cecilia took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "It's about Gift. Esther and David's daughter." Isaac's eyes widened. "What about her? She died years ago. Why are you bringing this up now?" Cecilia struggled to find the words. The guilt was overwhelming, but she knew she had to say it. I was the one who killed her." The confession hung in the air like a dark cloud. Isaac stared at her, stunned and unable to comprehend what he had just heard. "What do you mean you killed her?" he finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Cecilia broke down in tears, her body shaking with sobs. "I gave her poison. She came to ask for salt, and I gave her poison instead. I was so jealous, so angry. I didn't think. I just wanted to hurt them. I didn't think it would go this far." Isaac was speechless. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The woman he had married, the mother of his children, had committed such a heinous act. He felt a mix of anger, disbelief, and a deep sorrow for the innocent life that had been lost.
"Why, Cecilia? Why would you do such a thing?" he demanded, his voice breaking.
Cecilia shook her head, her tears flowing freely. "I don't know. I was so consumed by my own misery, by the feeling that our children would never measure up, that I let that darkness take over. I'm sorry, Isaac." The days following Cecilia's confession were tense and filled with an uneasy silence. Isaac was devastated, struggling to process the magnitude of his wife's crime. He knew they couldn't keep this to themselves any longer. They needed to find Esther and David. They needed to seek forgiveness. Cecilia, overwhelmed with guilt, agreed. She knew it was the right thing to do, but she was terrified of facing Esther and David, of seeing the pain she had caused in their eyes. She had stolen their joy, their miracle, and she feared they would never forgive her. Together, they began their search. It wasn't easy. Esther and David had moved to a different area, far from the memories of the compound. Isaac and Cecilia visited the old neighborhood, asking anyone who might know where they had gone. Slowly, they pieced together information, each clue bringing them closer to finding the grieving couple. After weeks of searching, they finally found them living in a quiet suburb. Esther and David had aged, their faces etched with lines of sorrow, but there was a calmness about them, a quiet strength that came from years of enduring pain. Cecilia and Isaac stood outside their modest home, hearts pounding with anxiety and fear. They knew this would be the hardest thing they had ever done, but they had to do it. Cecilia took a deep breath and knocked on the door. David opened the door, his expression curious but cautious. "Yes. Can I help you?" Cecilia's voice shook as she spoke. "David, it's me, Cecilia. I need to talk to you and Esther. Please, it's very important." David's face hardened slightly as he recognized her. He hesitated for a moment but then nodded, stepping aside to let them in. Esther was sitting in the living room, knitting a small sweater. She looked up as they entered, her eyes widening in surprise when she saw Cecilia. "Cecilia, Isaac, what?" Cecilia and Isaac exchanged a glance, both struggling to find the right words. Finally, Cecilia stepped forward, her eyes brimming with tears. "We've come to apologize," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "We know we can never undo the pain we caused you, but we've been haunted by our actions for years. We've come to seek your forgiveness. Please, forgive me, it was not intentional, I didn't know what came over me, I am truly sorry, it's true I cannot reverse what I caused." David, not knowing what exactly she was talking about, then asked, "What exactly are you talking about? Can you go straight to the point?" Cecilia looked up and down and she started. "One day Gift came to ask for salt, she said she was eating, and needed salt, but found out, they had run out of salt. She came to get some salt from me, instead of giving her salt, I gave her poison." The room fell silent. Esther and David could not believe their ears, they couldn't utter a single word. Esther broke into tears. "Cecilia, you had 3 children, I had only one that God gave me after many years of waiting. Cecilia, where did I wrong you that warranted you to sniff life out of my 13-year-old promising child? Oh, my God, Cecilia, so you have been behind the pain and sorrow of this family." David went straight to the door and ordered them to leave his house before he does something stupid. Cecilia and Isaac saw how tense the atmosphere was and they quickly left without any further delay. They kept sending people to plead for forgiveness on their behalf. Days turned to weeks and weeks turned to months. Esther and David, despite their initial hesitation, slowly opened their hearts to forgiveness. It wasn't easy, and many months were filled with tears and questions about why such a tragedy had to happen. But they leaned on their faith and each other, understanding that forgiveness was not just about absolving Cecilia but also about finding peace within themselves. They needed to forgive them so that they can have peace of mind. Unforgiveness is like indirectly drinking the poison the offender prepared and kept for the offender.